actually overwhelmed the sports facilities that we've got. As a result of the research that we did for the study, which was actually undertaken on behalf of the Real Estate Developers Association, we came to some conclusions which basically recommended that land that's on the sales program be taken off the sales program. And this is, and I know some of the people who did this study are actually standing here looking at me at the moment, but they were given the wrong brief. The whole of this is an area which was reclaimed from the harbour in Hong Kong, and this is the revised program for sale, and a lot of these sites are up for sale. And there was no consideration of the no development option. This area is right on the waterfront, and it's an entrance for ventilation of wind from the harbour into the old part of the city. And there's a deficit in Hong Kong of open space of 15 hectares. And if we were to change this to open space, there'd be 3.7 hectares of open space created. And this is just an image of what it could look like. And I think, if we go back to this one, through the buildings, they've determined 10 to 15 metre gaps between the buildings to allow the ventilation to go through. Now, one of the other things that came out, the worst areas in terms of the heat island effect from the mapping are areas like Sham Shui Po, older parts of Hong Kong, Tsim Sha Tsui, Bangkok. These are the areas where the heat island effect is the most noticeable. They're also the areas where the poorest people are. And by selling the land here, we're looking at the options in terms of creating finance or financial income. But what are the impacts? If you look beyond through the other parts of the town, you can see the fact that if there are no buildings here, then there's more space and more ventilation and more greenery and more sports activities. And there's actually, if you take the economic argument, there's another reason for doing this sort of thing. We also looked at the old North Point estate site, and on the top left-hand corner you have the government proposal, which is basically creating large podiums. I still can't understand why. And the only greenery is actually on the tops of buildings. There's one extremely small piece of open space at the back of the ferry pier. You can just see the ferry pier. See the little gap there between those two buildings? That's the only open space to be provided in that whole area. And North Point has a shortage of open space, and they count, when you look at North Point and you look at the way that they say that there's adequate open space, they include Victoria Park as being part of that open space. But one of the other things that came out of the assessment is that the people who have the less mobility, less advantage to be able to go to the open space, the poor people living in Sham Shui Po and other places, are also the people who have nothing in their locality that they can go to. So it sort of compounds the negative impact of everything. And so at the bottom we have an alternative, the no development option, which has never been looked at, because government perceived this as an opportunity to sell land for the benefit of Hong Kong. But in fact, if you rezone this to open space, that would provide all of the activity, all of the space that's needed to meet the minimum standard. And after I heard Evans talk the first time at a forum, we went and looked at the standards. We thought we should double the Hong Kong standards, because even if we double our standard, we're still half of Singapore's standard of open space. But we looked at it and we found we can't even meet our own standard at the moment in so many areas, particularly the older areas. And we did have another image, which I haven't got here, unfortunately. It's basically, why don't we create a linear park through Sham Shui Po? We resume land, we demolish buildings, we create open space, and we connect up existing areas of open space, as Edward mentioned. And then we start to solve the problems in terms of the locality, the convenience, and the ventilation. And at the end of the day, real estate developers said, this is great, we'll accept this. Please put in your proposal to have these sites removed from the land sales program. We don't need them. There are 60 other sites, and government hasn't started selling Kai Tak yet. So we don't actually need to have these for development. And the other reason they don't want to build on them It's because there's so much public outcry now of building walls along waterfronts that there's no, if the government doesn't sell these land, they're very happy because they won't be criticised for developing on sites sold by government. So that's the end, sort of a summary of the situation. We now like to invite 5 speakers to come up and please ask comments from them, make suggestions, any further interaction between you. We've got approximately 40 minutes, okay? So please, could you take your seats over there, and there's also a microphone.
Everybody will grab a seat.